They always say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but Elijah Brooks knew better. In America, some people never make it past the cover, especially if the cover is brown. He had everything they said would protect him: a law degree, a full-time job at the Supreme Court, a clean record, good posture, quiet voice, no tattoos, no hoodie, no threats. But none of that mattered the night he got pulled over for a taillight that wasn't even broken. It was a Thursday night, late enough for the streets to feel empty, early enough for judgment to still be alert. Elijah had just left work. He had stayed late to revise a legal draft, one involving civil liberties and the use of force by police. The irony would haunt him later. He was driving home in his silver Honda Accord. Nothing flashy, just functional. The kind of car that didn't raise eyebrows, or so he thought. The flash of red and blue came suddenly. No warning, no honk, just lights, a chirp of a siren, and the cold realization that, in this moment, nothing else about him mattered. He pulled over calmly, hands on the steering wheel. He knew the drill. Keep your movements slow, your voice low, your eyes forward. The officer approached with the stiffness of suspicion, scanning Elijah like a barcode. No words of courtesy, just a cold explanation. Broken tail light. Elijah didn't argue, didn't correct him. Even though he had checked the lights just that morning, he knew arguing meant escalation. He handed over his license. He mentioned where he worked, not to impress, just to explain. But explanations don't always work when prejudice enters first. There was a pause, a long one. The officer stared at the ID, then back at him, as if trying to reconcile the name on the card with the man in the seat. Because men like Elijah weren't supposed to work in places like that. Not in his mind. What followed wasn't a question, it was a test. He was told to step out of the vehicle, told to open the trunk, told to wait. In his trunk, legal pads, court documents, law books, and a lunch bag with half a sandwich. None of that changed the expression on the officer's face. Minutes passed. Then came another officer, older, supervising maybe. He looked at the ID again, said something quietly to the first man, and just like that, the tone shifted. They said he was free to go. No apology, no correction, just "you're good," as if they hadn't just turned his life into a checkpoint. But Elijah wasn't good. He was angry, not loud angry, not violent angry, but exhausted angry. The kind of anger that folds in on itself and burns slowly from the inside. He didn't sleep that night. He lay awake thinking about what could have happened, if his voice had cracked, if his hand had moved too quickly, if the wrong officer had pulled the trigger on the wrong instinct. He thought about the case he was writing, about qualified immunity and routine stops. He thought about the irony of defending rules that were used against him hours earlier. He thought about how the law he worked to uphold couldn't even recognize him in the dark. The next morning he didn't tell anyone. Not his colleagues, not his supervisor, not even his mother. Because deep down he knew they would either not understand or understand all too well. They would nod sympathetically, maybe offer a "that's awful" or "glad you're okay," and then they'd move on. But he couldn't, because once you see yourself through the eyes of someone who assumes the worst, it's hard to unsee it. For days he went through the motions, briefs, footnotes, coffee breaks, but something had shifted. He no longer believed that degrees, titles, or jobs could insulate someone from being reduced to a threat. He no longer believed that doing everything right guaranteed anything. He started to notice things more sharply. The way security guards always ask for his ID twice. The way strangers clutch their bags in elevators. The way white colleagues praised his articulate speech. He noticed how heavy a simple stare could feel, how hard it was to breathe when you realized your identity was only respected on paper. And yet he showed up, every day, not because he believed the system was perfect, but because he knew someone had to be inside it, chipping away from within. Weeks later, he was asked to contribute to a court opinion on police accountability. He didn't hesitate. He poured everything into it, not just the law, but the lived experience the law so often ignored. That opinion would go on to shape policy. It would be cited by advocates, debated on the floor of Congress, analyzed in law schools. But Elijah never put his name on it, because in the end, he didn't write it for credit. He wrote it for the version of himself who stood on that sidewalk with a briefcase full of truth and a badge of invisibility. He wrote it for the millions who won't get the benefit of the doubt, for the ones whose taillights are always broken, even when they shine just fine, for the ones whose identity is always questioned until it's proven or buried. Because sometimes justice isn't about the law. Sometimes it's about being seen.